So let me start by telling you what you already know, and by reiterating what the professor who spoke before me and spoke so eloquently touched upon in his presentation, which is that citizens have lost faith in their governments and their leaders. Folks, we are in trouble. We are faced with perhaps the most difficult time in our political, social, and economic history since independence. To estimated recorded resources being pilfered through various means amounting to $50 billion per annum. 1 billion people belonging to the poorest region of the world are being cheated and robbed persistently every single day. Because corruption is not only about stealing money from where it is needed the most, it is the consequences of such a rampant and callous act that's the problem. Now, the United Nations has identified some ripple effects, such as weak governance, which in turn can fuel organized crime networks, terrorism, and promote crimes such as human trafficking, arms and migrant smuggling, counterfeiting, and the trade in endangered species. Also, the issues of less prosperity. Corruption stifles economic growth, undermines the rule of law, and squanders talent and precious resources. Where corruption is rife, companies are reluctant to invest as the costs of doing business are significantly higher. In corrupt countries which have rich natural resources, the population often does not benefit from this wealth, and Africa is a victim of corruption. We are in trouble. When lucrative contracts are up for grabs, bribery, fraud, and embezzlement can plague large-scale infrastructure projects. Even the aftermaths of disasters can provide opportunities for corrupt operators to thrive. The Ebola outbreak, for example, in Sierra Leone and Liberia has proven this. An audit report on Sierra Leone found that inadequate controls over the disbursements of funds was highly prevalent. Hazard payments being made to hospitals with no proof of the money was actually going to the health workers on the front line, and in some cases a complete disregard of the law in procurement. So yes, my friends, even in the grimmest of circumstances where people are dying, including the most vulnerable children and women, corruption strives. Collusion also between the private sector and government officials is a common factor in this sad equation. Dear colleagues, another challenge the African citizenry is faced with is the worrying growing trend of authoritarian recidivism, where poor leadership is manifesting itself in different ways, from the wanton lack of political will to uphold the basic tenets of national constitutions. The term elongation, constitutional tampering, and self-imposition is becoming the norm and not the exception. And the impunity has crept back into our midst, where justice and rule of law is being undermined. And in such circumstances, corruption also thrives. The fundamental principle of separation of powers, which is the prerequisite for good governance, transparency, and accountability, is being systematically eroded. Overbearing executives are using their mandates, usurping the mandates of parliaments and national assemblies, and in the process laying the foundation for illegal and bad laws being passed. In other words, what is happening is that they are heaping legislative terrorism, and I like to repeat that term, legislative terrorism, not terrorism legislation. Let's be clear, there's a difference. They are heaping legislative terrorism upon the citizenry in the process. It also compromises the effectiveness and the independence of the judiciary, whereby the bench is forced to interpret laws that are not in line with modern democratic states and often contradict regional, continental, and international normative frameworks. So the very concept of upholding the social contract of fairness, opportunity, protection, social equality, and equity is being questioned, and rightly so. Because all these challenges continue to impact on Africa's ability to stem grand corruption and illicit financial flows.